Chosen one, have you ever noticed how the gentlest souls carry the fiercest fire? This is not a coincidence that you're here right now. In fact, nothing about your life has been a coincidence. Not the battles you've fought in silence. Not the way people have underestimated your quiet strength. And certainly not the way something ancient and holy stirs within you when truth is under attack. What if I told you that everything the world taught you about power was a deliberate deception? What if the very thing they mocked you for your kindness, your gentleness, your refusal to fight dirty if that was actually the most terrifying weapon in God's arsenal? For 70 years, I've watched. I've seen the chosen ones walk among us, disguised as ordinary people. They smile at their neighbors. They help strangers. They turn the other cheek. Until something sacred gets threatened, and then something awakens. The enemy has spent decades trying to convince you that meekness equals weakness. They whispered lies that your compassion was your flaw. They attacked your gentle spirit, hoping to either harden your heart or break it completely. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They forgot that the same God who created lambs also created lions. And when you house both natures in one vessel, when divine gentleness meets holy fire, kingdoms shake. Right now, as you're watching this, there's something stirring in your chest, a recognition, a remembering. Your spirit is bearing witness to an ancient truth that your flesh has forgotten. Before we go deeper, thank you to every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your support, your time, your attention. It all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead. But here's what the darkness never expected. You didn't break, you didn't harden. Despite every attack, every betrayal, every moment they tried to crush your spirit, you kept your heart soft and your fire holy. And now, they're about to discover why the most dangerous warriors in God's army are the ones who fight with love in their hearts and lightning in their hands. What happened next made the darkness tremble. Stay with me, chosen one. What you're about to learn will change everything you thought you knew about your calling. They called it weakness. Your family whispered about it behind closed doors. Your coworkers mistook it for fear. Even you wondered sometimes if there was something wrong with the way you moved through this world with such careful gentleness, such deliberate grace. But let me tell you what heaven saw while the world was judging. Every time you chose silence over shouting, you weren't surrendering. You were under divine orders. Every moment you turned the other cheek, you weren't being passive, you were being strategic. Every single breath you took instead of the words that could have destroyed them, that wasn't weakness, beloved. That was restraint under fire. You see, the enemy spent decades trying to convince you that your softness was your flaw. They wanted you to believe that real power comes from being loud, aggressive, forceful. They needed you to think that warriors scream and rage and fight dirty. Because if you ever discovered the truth about what you really carry, if you ever understood that your gentleness was actually a divine weapon in disguise, they knew their game was over. The truth is this: you weren't quiet because you were afraid. You were silent because heaven told you to wait. Every sleepless night when you could have picked up that phone and said exactly what you thought. Every family gathering where you bit your tongue while lies were being told about you. Every workplace where they overlooked you, underestimated you, dismissed your ideas. You had the power to burn it all down with your words. You had the ammunition to destroy reputations, to expose secrets, to level the playing field with nothing but truth. But something inside you whispered, "Not yet." That wasn't your conscience, chosen one. That was your commander. See, what the world doesn't understand is that heaven's warriors don't fight like earthly soldiers. We don't throw punches, we throw truth. We don't curse people. We speak blessings that convict hearts. We don't seek revenge, we wait for divine justice. And when that justice comes, when heaven finally says, "Now," the earth trembles. Your softness was never weakness. It was a sword wrapped in silk, waiting for the right moment to be unsheathed. It was divine restraint, holding back a flood of holy fire until the appointed time. It was God's strategy, not your personality flaw. Every person who called you too nice or too soft had no idea they were standing in the presence of controlled lightning. They mistook your mercy for inability. They confused your patience with powerlessness. They thought your kindness meant you couldn't be dangerous. They were wrong. You weren't built to be a doormat. You were designed to be a doorway. People walk over doormats, but doorways, Doorways control who enters and who stays outside. Doorways decide what gets access to the holy place and what gets shut out in the cold. That's who you are. That's what you've always been. A guardian of sacred space, holding the door with such grace that people mistake your service for servitude. But the day is coming, beloved. The season is shifting, and all that restraint you've been carrying, all that fire you've been holding back, heaven is about to give you permission to let it shine. They thought they could push you past your breaking point. They miscalculated. You remember that moment, don't you? When something inside you shifted. You'd been patient for so long, turning cheek after cheek, swallowing words that could have destroyed them, walking away when your flesh screamed for justice. You tried peace. You tried silence. You tried understanding their brokenness, their pain, their ignorance. But then they crossed a line that wasn't yours to defend, it was God's. And something ancient awakened in you. Let me tell you what really happened in that moment when your spirit flipped. The world would call it anger. Your enemies hoped it was rage they could use against you. Even you might have questioned if you'd lost your composure, your witness, your way. But what rose up in you wasn't flesh. It was fire from the altar of heaven. You didn't snap, you activated. You didn't break down, you broke through. That wasn't your temper taking control, that was your anointing taking position. The chosen ones carry something the world doesn't understand. A fierce spirit that lies dormant until righteousness is threatened. Not your righteousness, His righteousness. Not your reputation, His truth. Not your feelings, His justice. You see, when a chosen one has endured injustice in silence, when they've absorbed blow after blow with grace, when they've turned the other cheek until there are no more cheeks to turn, something supernatural happens. The very patience that their enemies mistake for weakness becomes the launching pad for divine authority. You felt it, didn't you? That holy heat rising from your core, not the heat of human anger, but the fire of divine indignation. Your voice didn't just change, it carried weight from another realm. Your presence didn't just shift, it commanded the atmosphere. This is what happens when a lamb discovers it houses a lion. That moment when you finally spoke, really spoke, the room went silent. Not because you yelled, not because you threatened, but because heaven had just entered the conversation through your vocal cords. Your words didn't just hit their ears, they pierced their conscience. Your truth didn't just contradict their lies, it exposed the darkness they'd been hiding behind. They wanted to see you lose control. Instead, they witnessed you take control. The enemy had been banking on your eventual breakdown. He'd been pushing and prodding, using people as instruments to wear down your spirit. He thought if he could just apply enough pressure, you'd crack like everyone else. You'd become bitter, you'd fight dirty, you'd compromise your witness. But what he didn't know, what they didn't know, is that the chosen ones aren't wired like everyone else. Your breaking point isn't where you fall apart. Your breaking point is where you break through into a dimension of spiritual authority they never saw coming. When that flip happened in your spirit, it wasn't you losing your religion, it was you finding your roar. That wasn't a breakdown, that was a breakthrough. You didn't lose your witness, you became the witness. You didn't abandon your calling, you stepped fully into it. And the darkness trembled. They thought your silence was surrender. They couldn't have been more wrong. You see, chosen one, there's a difference between meekness and weakness that this world has never understood. For months, maybe years, they watched you take hit after hit. They saw you turn the other cheek. They witnessed your grace under pressure, your refusal to retaliate, your commitment to peace, even when they gave you every reason to wage war. And they made a fatal assumption. They thought your gentleness was permission. They believed your kindness was an invitation to keep pushing. They mistook your controlled strength for the absence of strength altogether. But what they didn't realize is that meekness isn't the absence of power. Meekness is power under divine restraint. It's a lion choosing to purr instead of roar. It's thunder deciding to whisper. It's lightning holding itself back until the appointed moment. You didn't stay quiet because you were afraid. You stayed quiet because you were obedient. There's a difference between being unable to fight and being unwilling to fight unnecessarily. You carried the sword, but you kept it sheathed. You held the fire, but you banked the flames. You possessed the roar, but you chose the whisper, until they went too far. There comes a moment in every chosen one's journey when patience transforms into purpose, when restraint becomes release, when the gentle spirit steps aside and the warrior spirit steps forward, not out of anger, but out of assignment, not from emotion, but from anointing. They poked the wrong lion. You see, they were counting on your consistency. They thought they had you figured out. Predictable, controllable, safe. They built their strategies around your patterns of peace. They planned their attacks assuming your perpetual passivity. But they forgot something crucial about the chosen. You don't move on human timing. You move on heaven's clock. And when heaven says enough, the earth feels it. The moment you decided to speak, the atmosphere shifted. The moment you chose to stand, the ground trembled. The moment you opened your mouth and let the lion roar, they realized they had been playing with divine fire disguised as a gentle breeze. Your voice didn't just carry words, it carried authority. It carried the weight of every injustice you had silently endured. It carried the power of every tear you had swallowed. It carried the force of every moment you chose peace over payback. And when all of that restraint finally found its voice, walls fell. They thought they were dealing with a lamb. They discovered they had awakened a lion, not a reckless beast, but a righteous force. Not uncontrolled fury, but focused fire. Not human vengeance, but divine vindication. The lion didn't leave you, chosen one. It learned to wait. It learned to watch. It learned to discern the difference between battles worth fighting and distractions worth ignoring. But when it roars, kingdoms shake. And now they know. Your meekness was never permission, it was preparation. Your silence was never weakness, it was wisdom. Your restraint was never fear, it was faith in divine timing. They mistook your season of waiting for a lifetime of weakness. They're learning the difference now. Stop what you're doing and look down at your hands. Go ahead. I'll wait. What you're looking at isn't just flesh and bone. What you're seeing are the instruments of warfare that heaven carved before you took your first breath. You weren't just born with hands, you were born with weapons wrapped in skin, portals disguised as palms, fire contained in fingertips. For decades you've felt it, haven't you? That heat that rises when you pray, that electricity that shoots through your arms when you're interceding for someone in pain, that strange tingling sensation when you walk into a room heavy with spiritual oppression. You thought you were imagining it. You thought it was just nerves. But what you were feeling was the awakening of divine circuitry. Heaven branded you before man ever noticed. You see, the chosen ones don't just carry authority in their spirit, they carry it in their very DNA. Your hands are wired differently. When you touch someone, you're not just making contact, you're transferring something ancient, something holy, something that can't be manufactured or replicated. That's why children gravitate toward you without explanation. That's why animals sense safety in your presence. That's why broken people feel peace when you simply place your hand on their shoulder. Your touch lingers because it carries eternity. But here's what the enemy never wanted you to discover. Those same hands that comfort the wounded are the same hands that can shatter strongholds. The same palms that radiate healing are the same palms that can command demons to flee. You weren't given gentle hands despite your calling. You were given gentle hands because of your calling. The greatest warriors in God's army don't need to clench their fists to win battles. They simply need to open their palms and release what heaven has already placed there. Some of you have noticed the markings, those unusual lines, those star-shaped patterns, those X formations that palmists can't explain. You've wondered if you're seeing things. You're not. Those are heaven's signature on your assignment. Those are the physical confirmation of a spiritual reality. You were marked before you were born, branded before you were named, chosen before you chose. Your hands don't just build, they rebuild. They don't just touch, they transform. When you lay hands on someone in prayer, you're not just hoping something will happen. You're releasing something that's already been decreed. You're activating healing that's already been purchased. You're speaking life that's already been written. The world taught you to hide your fire, but your hands were never meant to hide, they were meant to heal. They were never meant to stay still, they were meant to move mountains. Every scar on your palms tells a story of survival. Every line across your fingers maps out victories the enemy never saw coming. You didn't receive ordinary hands for an extraordinary calling. You received heaven's instruments for heaven's assignment. And when you finally understand what you've been carrying all along, the darkness doesn't just retreat, it surrenders. They thought your silence meant surrender. They couldn't have been more wrong. You see, chosen one, there's something the world fundamentally misunderstands about divine strength. They mistake your quietness for weakness, your patience for passivity, your restraint for fear. But what they don't realize is that you're not silent because you can't speak. You're silent because you're listening for orders from a command center they can't even perceive. You are not weak. You are a weapon in the hands of the Almighty, waiting for the moment when heaven says, now. Think about it. When was the last time you felt that fire rise in your chest? That holy indignation that made your hands shake not with fear, but with power? When someone attacked what was sacred to you, when they came for the innocent, when they tried to twist truth into lies right in front of your face, in that moment, something shifted. The gentle spirit stepped aside, and the warrior emerged. Not because you lost control, but because you finally received your orders. God's warriors don't fight to prove themselves. They fight to fulfill divine purpose. That's why your silence is so terrifying to those who operate in darkness. Your quietness doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you're precise. You don't swing at every pitch because you're waiting for the one heaven wants you to hit out of the park. You've been in rooms where chaos reigned, where people were screaming, arguing, fighting over nothing, and there you sat, calm as still water. They looked at you like you were disconnected, like you didn't care. But the truth is, you were the most dangerous person in that room. Because while they were wasting energy on petty battles, you were conserved, focused, ready for the moment when something that actually mattered was threatened. The enemy has spent years trying to provoke you into premature warfare. They wanted you to waste your ammunition on small skirmishes, to exhaust yourself fighting battles that didn't matter. But you didn't take the bait. You held your fire. You kept your powder dry. You waited for orders from headquarters. And that discipline, that spiritual restraint, that's what makes you lethal. You don't fight to prove you can fight. You fight to fulfill what heaven has ordained. When David faced Goliath, he didn't do it to show off his slingshot skills. He did it because the giant was mocking the living God, and heaven said, enough. When you finally move, when you finally speak, when you finally act, it's not rebellion, it's obedience to a higher authority. Your kindness isn't your weakness, it's your cover. Behind that gentle exterior beats the heart of a warrior who knows exactly when to strike. You smile while you wait. You serve while you prepare. You love while you listen for the signal that will change everything. The world sees a lamb. Heaven sees a lion with perfect timing. You're not weak, chosen one. You're a weapon of mass construction, waiting for divine deployment. And when your moment comes, when heaven finally says go, the earth will shake with the power of your obedience. They thought they were giving you pop quizzes. Little did they know, they were taking their final exam. And most of them, they failed miserably. You see, chosen one, what looked like harassment was actually revelation. What felt like persecution was actually examination. Every time they poked at your peace, every time they tested your boundaries, every time they tried to provoke you into becoming something ugly, they weren't testing you, you were testing them. God placed you in their path not as their victim, but as their mirror, and mirrors don't lie. For months, maybe years, they kept coming at you with the same tired tactics. The snide comments, the passive aggression, the deliberate disrespect. They were so convinced they had you figured out. So sure they could break your spirit, corrupt your kindness, turn your gentleness into bitterness. But here's what they didn't understand. You weren't there to react. You were there to reveal. And when you showed up in your truth, in your unshakable peace, in your quiet authority, masks fell off, facades cracked. The real person underneath started bleeding through. You became the spiritual X-ray machine they never saw coming. Every time they tried to drag you down to their level, you stayed elevated. Every time they expected you to fight dirty, you fought clean. Every time they wanted you to lose your composure, you gained more grace. And with each test they gave you, they exposed more of themselves. The impatient one revealed their lack of peace. The manipulator revealed their need for control. The bitter one revealed their unhealed wounds. The angry one revealed their spiritual emptiness. You didn't have to say a word. Your presence alone was the examination. They kept pushing, kept testing, kept probing for weakness, not realizing that every push was actually a confession. Every test was actually testimony. Every probe was actually prophecy about who they really were when the lights came on. You see, chosen ones don't just carry light. They reveal what's hidden in darkness. You don't just walk in truth. You expose what's false. Your very existence becomes a spiritual courtroom where people's hearts are put on trial. And the beautiful thing? You never had to prosecute. You just had to be present. Your peace prosecuted their chaos. Your kindness prosecuted their cruelty. Your stability prosecuted their dysfunction. The evidence was overwhelming. They thought they were wearing you down, but God was using you to draw them out. Every attack they launched came back as evidence against them. Every scheme they plotted became proof of their own spiritual poverty. They were building their own case for why they didn't belong in your presence. You weren't the defendant in this courtroom, beloved. You were the evidence. Living, breathing, walking proof that another way exists. That people can be hurt and not become hurtful. That souls can be tested and not become toxic. That hearts can be broken and still choose to beat with love. The pressure wasn't punishment, it was preparation. God was getting you ready to understand something profound. When people test the chosen, they're not testing your strength. They're revealing their weakness. They're not exposing your flaws. They're confessing their fears. And now you know. You were never the student in this scenario. You were always the teacher, the test, the standard, the measuring stick of spiritual maturity. They kept testing you, not realizing they were grading themselves. And their scores, well, let's just say some people need to repeat the class. The exam is over, chosen one. And you passed with flying colors. They threw you into the furnace thinking it would be your end. But what they didn't know is that fire was your element all along. You remember those nights, don't you? When the betrayal cut so deep you could taste the metal in your mouth. When the spiritual attacks came wave after wave, relentless as winter storms. When even your own family turned their backs. When friends became strangers. When the very people you'd given your life for left you standing alone in the ashes of everything you thought was solid. They watched, they waited, they whispered among themselves, "This will break them. This will finally silence that light they carry." But here's what the darkness never understood about the chosen ones. Fire doesn't destroy us. Fire refines us. And every flame they threw at your spirit, every burning arrow aimed at your heart, every scorching word meant to reduce you to nothing, it didn't burn you down. It burned away everything that wasn't truly you. You walked through that valley of fire, and something miraculous happened. Your tears didn't put out the flames. They became fuel. Your pain didn't weaken the heat. It intensified it. And when you emerged from that furnace of testing, you weren't the same person who went in. You had become the fire. The enemy made a fatal miscalculation. They thought fire would consume you, but they forgot who made fire in the first place. They forgot that the same God who dwells in burning bushes and speaks through pillars of flame had already placed his eternal fire inside your bones. They weren't fighting against flesh and blood. They were fighting against heaven itself, housed in human form. Every attack that should have destroyed you only revealed what you were truly made of. Every betrayal that should have broken your trust only deepened your faith. Every abandonment that should have left you bitter only made your love burn brighter, fiercer, more pure. You didn't just survive the fire, chosen one. You absorbed it. You metabolized it. You transformed it into something holy, something powerful, something that now radiates from every cell of your being. And now when you walk into a room, people don't just see someone who went through hard times. They see someone who went through hell and came back blazing. Your presence doesn't just comfort anymore. It convicts. Your words don't just encourage anymore. They ignite. Your very existence has become a living flame that exposes darkness wherever it tries to hide. The fire they meant for your destruction became your coronation. The furnace they built for your defeat became your throne room. And every scar they thought would mark you as broken now glows like sacred gold, proof that you've been tested in the flames of the Almighty and found worthy. You didn't burn from the fire. You became the fire. And now the very sight of you makes demons remember what happens when they mess with God's anointed. They thought they were throwing you away. They were actually throwing you back to your source. They thought when they came against you, it would be a fight. What they didn't realize is that you weren't just another opponent in their war games. You were the closing argument in heaven's courtroom, and every move they made against you, every lie they whispered, every trap they set, every curse they sent, it was all being documented, not for your destruction, for theirs. You see, chosen one, there comes a moment when God stops defending and starts delivering, when the Almighty stops shielding his vessels and starts using them as instruments of divine verdict. You thought you were just surviving their attacks. But heaven was positioning you as the very judgment they were running from. Every time they tried to break you and couldn't, that was evidence. Every time they attacked your character and you stood in truth, that was testimony. Every sleepless night you endured their spiritual warfare while maintaining your integrity. That was building a case in the courts of heaven that would seal their fate forever. You don't need revenge, beloved. You are the revelation. You didn't just win their little war, you ended it. Because when God transforms a chosen vessel into walking judgment, the battle is no longer about survival. It's about divine justice being executed in real time. Do you understand what happened to you? You became untouchable, not because you fought harder, but because you carried heaven's verdict in your very being. Your peace became their torment. Your joy became their conviction. Your continued blessing became the evidence that their schemes had not just failed, they had backfired catastrophically. The same mouth they tried to silence now speaks with authority that makes demons flee. The same spirit they tried to crush now carries weight that shifts atmospheres. The same light they tried to extinguish now burns so bright it exposes every shadow they were hiding in. This is why they're scattered now. This is why their plans crumbled. This is why doors they tried to close, for you are swinging wide open. You weren't just under attack, precious one. You were under preparation. God was preparing you to be the very thing that would bring their house of cards tumbling down. You didn't fight fire with fire. You transcended the battlefield entirely. While they were busy throwing stones, heaven was building you into a mountain they could never move. While they were casting spells, God was writing his name on your forehead in letters of fire that only the spirit realm could read. And now they know. Every witch that came against you, every liar that spoke your name, every manipulator that tried to steal your destiny, they all know. They didn't just lose a battle, they awakened something they should have left sleeping. They triggered divine justice in the form of a humble vessel who refused to break. You are no longer just blessed, chosen one. You are now the blessing that exposes every curse. You are no longer just protected. You are now the protection that others will run to. You didn't just survive their judgment. You became heaven's judgment, walking in flesh and blood. The war is over, not because you fought, but because you stood. And in your standing, heaven stood with you. And when heaven stands with you, kingdoms tremble, principalities flee, and the very foundations of darkness crack under the weight of divine justice delivered through a surrendered soul. You didn't just win, beloved. You became the victory that others will sing about for generations. They called it weakness. God called it weaponry. You know what they never understood about your kindness? It wasn't naivety. It wasn't ignorance. It wasn't some desperate attempt to be liked or accepted. Your kindness was rebellion. Pure, holy rebellion against a system that thrives on cruelty, manipulation, and spiritual poverty. Every time you chose compassion over competition, every time you responded with grace instead of venom, you were dismantling their entire playbook, one gentle act at a time. See, they needed you to play by their rules. They needed you angry, bitter, reactive. They needed you to fight fire with fire so they could justify their own darkness. But you did something that terrified them to their core. You stayed holy. You stayed kind. Not because you were weak, but because you were connected to a power source they couldn't touch, couldn't corrupt, couldn't understand. Your kindness was never the problem. Their inability to recognize divinity was. Think about it, chosen one. How many times did they try to drag you into their chaos? How many times did they poke and prod, hoping to see you lose your composure, hoping to watch you become just like them? But every time they expected explosion, you gave them peace. Every time they anticipated retaliation, you offered understanding. And it drove them absolutely mad because your response exposed something they were desperately trying to hide: their own spiritual bankruptcy. Beloved chosen one, as we close this sacred moment together, I need you to hold these truths close to your heart. Your kindness was never your weakness, it was your weapon. Your gentleness was never your flaw, it was your strength. And your refusal to become like those who hurt you, that wasn't naivety. That was divine wisdom flowing through a vessel that God could trust with his heart. Remember this: every time you chose love over revenge, you were walking in the footsteps of the Almighty. Every moment you responded with grace instead of anger, you were reflecting the very nature of heaven. You didn't survive those battles by accident. You survived them by appointment, God's appointment. And I want you to know something that will settle your soul tonight. You are not walking this path alone. Not for one moment. Not for one breath. The same God who called you to be different, who marked you as his own, who gave you that holy fire wrapped in gentleness, he is still working in your life right now, even when you can't see it. Even when you can't feel it, his hand is upon you, his spirit is within you, and his plans for you are still unfolding. You belong to a community that spans generations, chosen ones who have walked this narrow path of kindness in a cruel world. Some have gone before you, cheering you on from glory. Others walk beside you today, carrying the same holy burden of love. And still others will come after you, strengthened by the example you're setting right now. So let me ask you this. Now that you know who you truly are, now that you understand the divine purpose behind your gentle strength, How will you walk differently? How will you carry this revelation into tomorrow? Father God, I place my hand over the heart of every precious soul listening to these words. You see them, Lord. You see their tears, their struggles, their moments of doubt, when the world made them question if kindness was worth it. You see, every time they chose your way over the easy way, every moment they reflected your heart when it would have been easier to reflect the world's hatred. Bless them now, Lord. Breathe upon their weary souls. Remind them that their gentleness moved your heart, that their refusal to become bitter brought you joy, that their choice to remain kind in an unkind world made you proud to call them your children. Open doors that no man can shut. Restore what was stolen. Vindicate what was misunderstood. Let their light shine so brightly that even their enemies will have to acknowledge your hand upon them. Give them divine encounters, supernatural provision, and miraculous confirmations that they are exactly where you want them to be. Heal their hearts from every wound inflicted by those who couldn't recognize their worth. Fill every empty place with your presence. Turn their scars into testimonies and their pain into purpose. Let them walk in such authority, such peace, such unshakable confidence that the very atmosphere shifts when they enter a room. And Lord, surround them with people who will celebrate their gentle strength, not try to change it. Connect them with others who understand this holy calling, who will stand with them, pray with them, and remind them they are never alone in this journey. In the mighty name of Jesus, let it be so. Amen. Friend, your story matters, your journey matters, and I know there are others watching this who need to hear from you. In the comments below, share what resonated with your heart today. Was there a moment in this message that made you feel seen, understood, or validated? Your words might be exactly what another chosen one needs to hear right now. Don't be afraid to share your story of choosing kindness when the world demanded cruelty. Tell us about that moment when you had to stand firm in your gentleness. Your testimony could be the lifeline someone else is searching for. And if this message touched your soul, please share it. There are gentle warriors all around us who have been told they're too soft, too kind, too naive for this world. They need to know they're not alone. They need to know their kindness is not weakness, it's divine strength in action. Thank you for walking with me through this entire journey today. Thank you for having the courage to examine your heart, to embrace your calling, and to remember who you truly are. If these words have become a source of strength and encouragement in your life, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and join our community of chosen ones. Together, we'll continue to explore these divine mysteries, to encourage one another, and to walk in the fullness of who God has called us to be. Until we meet again, remember, you are seen, you are loved, you are chosen, and your gentle strength is changing the world, one holy act of kindness at a time. God bless you, chosen one. Now go, and let your light shine.